What's up, guys? Welcome to the NFL First Look here on RotoGrinders, your first of 5 hours of NFL shows here on RotoGrinders. I am Britt Devine, joined today by my usual suspects. Chris, Beermakers fan Prince, his family demolished, I heard, 200 pounds of turkey over Thanksgiving, and Paul Bogslight Arrington, who consumed 30 packs of beer over the holiday. Guys, what's up?
I'd say that's pretty accurate.
Beer, how accurate was that for you?
Oh, you're way under, man. It was well over 200 pounds. So a good holiday. Hope everybody out there had a great holiday. Obviously, we're closing in on Christmas, the end of the football season, but still got a lot of action, a lot of big tournaments out there. So week 14, boys.
Yeah, speaking of tournaments, our sponsor is DraftKings, guys. Now, there is no Millionaire Maker this week. They are crowning a millionaire in their live event, King of the Beach. So there's no King of the Beach qualifiers either. So Britt, what do they have for us this week? So they do have a $1 million tournament this week. It's a $20 buy-in. They're calling it the Sunday Million Special. $200,000 to first place. Still tons of tournaments over there on DraftKings and a ton of qualifiers to that $10 million fantasy football championship that they have going on over there. I'm definitely trying to get my couple of my seats via those qualifiers to that $1,500 event. I think that's got a $3.1 million prize pool. I'm going to be going hard at that. What about you guys?
Oh yeah, I mean,
Big money, man. It's everywhere. So you got to get out there and at least throw some teams in some of these tournaments for sure. Give yourself a shot at it.
I'm not a big qualifier guy myself, but I'm gonna have to hop into a few of these this weekend. There's just some really good deals out there. I've noticed. You get, I think in the bunch qualifiers where if you get in the top 400 or something, you get 5 millionaire maker qualifiers. I saw a couple of those. It's pretty cool, and I'm going to find myself hopping into a few of those this weekend.
Yeah, that $1,500 price point. Not very easy for a lot of us to buy into, but if you can get in via those qualifiers, man, that's how I'm going to be attempting to do it, guys. So make sure to check those out. They're in every sport, basketball, college football. I still think there's some of that going on, so check them out. There's some for Thursday NFL, Sunday NFL, all different ways, and we're going to help you right now try to win some of those. We're going to start right off with the first game of the week, the Thursday night game, Beer. That's the Cowboys at the Bears. Let's talk the Bears here. How interested are you in using a guy like Jay Cutler, Matt Forte, Alshon Jeffrey, Brandon Marshall? They are at home. The weather might be a little tricky this weekend, or tomorrow night, actually. What's your take on the Bears this week?
Forte, that's the guy I really want. Cutler, to me, it's too up and down, too risky. Sure, he's going to have his good games here and there, but even against Dallas, who's not a very good defense, in my opinion, Cutler's still risky. And Thursday night games, I like to stay away in general. If I am targeting anybody, though, it would be Forte against Dallas. I mean, the guy's a machine, gets it done every week. On the ground, through the air, especially on a DraftKings, the full PPR. And he's about the best there is at catching the ball out of the backfield. So highly involved in the passing game. Whether they're up, down, it doesn't really matter. He's still going to get his numbers. So no issues with him.
His price has come down. He's only $8,700. I mean, a couple weeks ago he was $10,000 something like that on DraftKings.
Yeah, I mean he was way head and shoulders above the rest of the running backs. So good price on him. I don't mind that. And if I'm choosing between the receivers, I think it's Alshon Jeffrey right now. Gives you more big playability. I think Marshall's probably the more consistent, safer option, but Jeffrey, with that big playability and his ability in the red zone, makes him a threat as well. So I think this game will have some points, but I think everybody's going to be rostering people from this game if they're playing Thursdays, which to me says fade it. So a little bit of Forte for me, a little bit of Jeffrey. Other than that, I think I'm going to stay away. Even Martellus Bennett in the old revenge game against his former team, I don't think I'm going there either. So should be a fun game to watch. Should be some offense, but these guys are going to be very popular in this primetime game.
Yeah, Martellus Bennett, he had a nice price spike after his good week last week. He's up to $5,200. That's the fourth highest tight end this week. Not sure I want to spend that much on tight end this week. I might be aiming a little lower. Boggs, let's go to the other side of the ball. You got Tony Romo. You got DeMarco Murray. You got Des Bryant. That's about it for me. I'm not going to be taking any Jason Witten. Are you with me on those three guys? I think you can roster any three of those and feel very comfortable about it. against the Bears, who just they just don't really look like they want to play football anymore.
Yeah, I mean that Bears team, it's a sad story. I mean they're just awful defensively, offensively struggling moving the ball. You know, didn't look too. You know, they got off to a good strong start at Thanksgiving game, but eventually, you know, they were exposed and were unable to come back from it. So I think that Dallas is in a good spot here. You know, I really wasn't high on Tony Romo. I still think he's still kind of feeling lingering issues from that back injury. But this is his hometown team, if I'm not mistaken. You know, he's a Chicago guy. He always seems to show up in these type of games against the Bears. And the Tony Romo to Dez Bryant combination is as juicy as ever this week.
Yeah, Dez Bryant, let me just jump in here. He's the 15th highest priced wide receiver this week. It feels like I'm stealing candy by rostering him on DraftKings this week.
If I'm not mistaken, he's about at the same price point that Julio Jones was either last week or the last couple of weeks. But it's very juicy. It's going to be hard to pass up. He's going up against Kyle Fuller, who had a really good start to the season, but struggled big time versus Calvin Johnson on that Thanksgiving game. I think it's going to be the same story. Obviously, we're going to need to check the weather, see how that's going out there in Chicago. Should be cold, but I think Dez Bryant's in for a monster game. Same with DeMarco Murray. He's going to get his share of the workload, or going to get the entire workload.
If you had to choose a running back in this week, Boggs, you got Murray, he's 8,800. You got Forte, 8,700. Out of those two, which one you got?
Well, on DraftKings, I always like Forte. You know, I think the upside is about the same, and their floors are relatively the same. But Forte, a guy that catches more balls, so for that reason, I would go Forte. But it's close. I think they're both, you know, juicy in terms of their pricing. They both have good matchups, and they both should have good games. I agree with Beers. I think a lot of scoring is going to be had in this game with two pretty much weak defenses. You know, Dallas kind of skidded through the season with their defense, but it's starting to get exposed now. So if Cutler can find Alshon Jeffrey a couple times, this game could turn into a shootout. And so for that reason, pretty much I'm on board all those guys with you. I will say that in the slot, Cole Beasley, not the biggest fan of him, but at $3,200, he has a pretty good matchup as the slot receiver going up against the Bears' DeMonte Hurst, who's not a very good cornerback according to Pro Football Focus. So that's a little sleeper if you want some of that. We've got some more of those, though, if you're not playing on a Thursday. But I wouldn't mind taking a shot on him. He's got the big play potential.
Yeah, guys, if you're playing these Thursday games, if you're playing a large field tournament, these guys are going to, it's Dallas, it's a Cowboys game with the Bears in prime time. These guys are going to be very highly owned, even though we do think it's going to be high scoring. There is a lot of merit of completely fading this game just because these guys are just going to be severely overowned for the Thursday game. So what we do like some of the guys. If you're running multiple lineups, don't forget to include a couple that don't have any from this game. Let's go to the next game here, Beer. Pittsburgh and Cincinnati. I'm just not sold on anyone from the Cincinnati offense this week. Dalton, you know, he might throw a touchdown, he might throw 3 picks. Giovanni Bernard and Hill, it's kind of, you know, who's going to get the things there. Outside of A.J. Green, I don't really want any part of the Cincinnati offense this week.
I'm with you. A.J. Green's pretty much the only guy I see of interest. The running backs, it's hard right now. I think they're eating into each other's value, you know, so it makes it tough to roster either one, even at some pretty nice price points. I mean, Jeremy Hill at $5,400, Gio Bernard at $53. Those are great prices on those guys. The problem is I don't know which guy's the lead guy, which guy's going to get more carries. Are they going to split them evenly? Is Hill the goal line back? It's just a lot of unanswered questions there. Makes me want to stay away. So Green, I like him. His price on DraftKings, not bad. I mean, I'd rather have a Jordy Nelson at $8,100 compared to Green, but I think that makes Green a good tournament play because that's what most people would do. Go down and take Jordy, or there's some other guys right below him, Josh Gordon, T.Y. Hilton. So Green always seems to be under-owned when comparing.
He's going to be really under-owned this week, just for his prices, and you mentioned those guys just below him.
Yeah, and you compare him to the Demaryius Thomas, Antonio Browns, Calvin Johnson. I think he belongs in that tier, but in a tournament, he never has the ownership that those guys have. So if you're looking to roster a stud, yet somebody that's going to be a little bit under-owned, I don't think there's anybody in that Pittsburgh secondary that can contain him. The guy's a beast. He's a monster in the red zone, so he's really the only target here. Sanu has kind of fallen off the last couple weeks, so don't really want to go there, and I don't trust Jermaine Gresham or Andy Dalton at this point. So Green for me, maybe the Cincinnati defense could be interesting. We've seen the Steelers struggle on the road. We saw it at the Jets, a couple other different games where they just have not looked the same. There's some Steelers I like in this game, but I think the Bengals D could be a viable option as well.
Yeah, I wasn't really looking at the Bengals D because I'm going to get to Boggs here, and I am loving this Pittsburgh offense. Le'Veon Bell specifically, there's no one else in the backfield there with Blunt gone. He is just a workhorse, getting a ton of touches every week. This Bengals defense has been very susceptible to the run. I love Le'Veon Bell, and he's the highest priced running back on DraftKings. And I got to give a little credit to DraftKings. They've really made the pricing much better than what it was earlier in the season. It's going to be very hard to roster Le'Veon Bell at 9,400 this week, but I think he is just in line for a huge game box.
Yeah, absolutely. Cincinnati's still going to be without Vontaze Burfict, it looks like. They're all-pro middle linebacker. They've been without him for quite a while, and they've been getting burned on the ground by teams. So Le'Veon Bell, true workhorse back. You can put him right up in that same tier of guys in the top 6. It's the pricing. It's tougher this week. There's no one that sticks out. So you're going to have to find some value if you're going to try and squeeze a guy like Bell in there. But, we always say it, I wish he was priced higher because he's got the terrific matchup. Ben tends to struggle on the road, kind of banged up too. You can expect an extra, few carries here or there for Le'Veon Bell, more than he already was probably in line for, which makes him a terrific play in my opinion. Because Roethlisberger hurt that hand, he was able to still have a pretty decent game, trying to come back, mostly in garbage time. Don't hate it because the Bengals defense, they can't stop the run, and they also can't get to the quarterback. Giving even Ben Roethlisberger, a guy that can handle a pass rush, even more time to throw, I think sets up nicely for the Pittsburgh Steelers in this game. So I don't hate Antonio Brown, even though the Bengals have been effective stopping the pass. And you could even consider taking Heath Miller at $4,600. I think a lot of people are going to gravitate towards a Witten or a Antonio Gates or even a Travis Kelce this week. And Heath Miller always flies under the radar, but he's capable of putting up big games like we saw last week. So I don't hate Heath Miller. The upside's not there, but I think he's got a safe floor this week going against the Bengals.
Yeah, Le'Veon Bell, my number one halfback of the week, and priced as so on DraftKings for sure. Next game here, Beer. Rams at Redskins. I saw Colt McCoy. He had a pretty decent fantasy game against Indianapolis his last game out. The Rams, they like to give up points through the air. What's your take on McCoy, Garcon, Jackson, and my favorite play from this game, Jordan Reed? I was on him last week. McCoy just loves to target this guy as a tight end.
Yeah, it's hard to trust Jordan Reed, though. I mean, we've seen the flashes like this, and we get all high on him, and then you roster him the next week, and he drops a dud on you. So you're right in the sense McCoy looks for him. Reed, definitely a talented tight end. I mean, to me, he looks just like Aaron Hernandez out there. Same type of player. Just didn't murder the whole.
Yeah, hopefully he's not the same type of player.
Same type of player on the field without the murdering rampages, we'll say. So I don't mind him. I like Boggs' point on Heath Miller, though. I think Reed's going to be very popular based on what we did last week. Same price as Miller. Miller will be much more under-owned. Maybe not the ceiling as Reed, but Heath can put together some big games as well. So I'm really not on a lot in this game. The St. Louis D has really improved. Obviously, won a lot of money for a lot of people last week. I know that one was at home, but Redskins' offense just doesn't look the part to me. I'm not a Colt McCoy believer. It's a tough matchup for Alfred Morris. Deshaun Jackson's banged up. Garcon's been who's what happened to Garcon. He's just been a
He's
shell of
gone.
himself this year. And Reed's going to be too popular for me. So, going to be honest here, I'm not going to be on Washington very heavily at all this week. I think this could be a lower scoring game than people expect. I don't really want any part of the Redskins offense.
Boggs, let's go to the Rams here. I'm not chasing Trey Mason this week. The Redskins pretty stout up front. I want to hear your take on him. I'm going to check his prices around the industry real quick. But what's your take on Shaun Hill? The Skins, they can be beat through the air. Shaun Hill, the Stedman Bailey's kind of been breaking out. Tavon Austin, Kenny Britt, Jared Cook. Is any of those guys, pique your interest? I'm just good. I think I'm going to be avoiding this game outside of Jordan Reed. I really like Jordan Reed.
Well, I think that might get you in trouble here. I mean, we all saw what Trey Mason did last week, albeit it was against the Raiders. But Washington, I know the numbers say that they're, pretty stout against the run.
6,700 on DraftKings. That is a lot for Trey Mason. You can get Justin Forsett. You could get LaShawn McCoy. It is against Seattle. You can go down to a Heron, Fred Jackson. It gets a little dicey the further down you go. But that's a pretty steep price for Trey Mason. I mean, I'd rather pay up for a Justin Forsett, a C.J. Anderson. It's tough on DraftKings this week. I'll give him good credit there.
Yeah, I mean, it is tough, but if you're looking for a mid-tier guy, I actually like Trey Mason over all those guys that you mentioned, especially given the fact that they absolutely blew out the Raiders. Not to toot my own horn, but I believe I remember saying that last week that was going to happen. And he was in there for the majority of the snaps, almost every play in the game. He was involved in the passing game as well. If Washington is going to be blitzing like they do under Jim Haslett, a few dump-offs here or there, and really, in my opinion, or I guess from what I remember, Washington, they're unathletic defensively. So you get guys that have a lot of talent and speed. They can make bust big plays, and we saw it last week with Trey Mason in his big breakout game. I think it continues this week. And on the receiving side, I think a couple guys are in play. It's really difficult because I'm not on Shaun Hill. I think he kind of reverts back to that game manager type of role this week. Because I don't think that they're going to be able to come out and just absolutely stomp Washington like we saw last week. So if you want to play the matchups, Stedman Bailey's your guy. If you want to play the upside or the GPP play, I think it's Kenny Britt this week. And then if you're looking for some value, Tavon Austin, hats off to Beer Makers fan, came through last week with a nice little fly sweep option run. And got himself a touchdown. He wasn't really involved heavily after that, but he also has that upside in the special teams department as the punt returner. So there's a lot to love. It all kind of goes on, how you think the game's going to play out. I think the safest receiver is Stedman Bailey. I think the GPP, the guy no one's going to be on, is Kenny Britt. And then if you're looking for that punt play, it's going to be Tavon Austin.
Beer, let's go to the next game here. Giants at Titans. We have the return of Jake Locker as a starting quarterback. $5,400 on DraftKings. Is this going to be a Ryan Fitzpatrick-ish type coming out party for Locker against the Giants who kind of struggle against the pass?
I wouldn't go that far, but I'm not writing him off completely. I'm not a big Jake Locker guy either. I mean, the kid looked great coming out of college. Thought he had a bright future. Just been very inconsistent, but he has shown a ceiling. He's had some big games in his career, and he's fighting for his job, his career, his life here. So I think he can come out, put up a good game here. So at his price point, I don't mind the play in a tournament at 5,400.
If you're looking at a cheap quarterback this week, let me throw, you got, we'll say 5,500 or less. Shaun Hill, McCown, Bridgewater against the Jets, although Bridgewater hasn't done too much. Stanton, Locker, Hoyer at 5,200 is very interesting, but I'm going to have a couple notes on him. Geno Smith, Locker looks pretty interesting to me there.
Yeah, I mean, he's right at the top of that list. There's nobody that you name that really jumps off the page. So, and like I said, it's based on he can put together some big plays. He can run the football, which we know gives you a lot of added points and another dimension for your quarterback. So,
yeah. What if Mettenberger's in? I'm reading his latest. His latest thing came out just a little while ago. The coach is pretty optimistic. It's looking like Mettenberger might be able to play this week. He's only 5,600. You got to like that too.
Yeah, I mean either guy. So I read earlier that he wasn't going to play, and then I just read the same report. So I think either guy is intriguing in a tournament. I mean, they don't jump off the page. It's not a guy I'm going to roster across the board, but Giants are so-so at average D, I think is the best way to put it. They're not really great at anything. They're not terrible at anything. They're kind of right in the middle. So I think the Titans could be sneaky here. A bounce-back guy could be Delaney Walker. I love to target guys coming off a bad game. One catch for 6 yards certainly qualifies as a bad game, and I know he let a lot of people down. I had him in a few lineups, some real nice lineups that he torpedoed. So important that we always mention it, all three of us. Don't be afraid to go back to the well. Just because a guy burned you last week doesn't mean he's going to do it again. So Walker's price is nice. Kendall Wright was a guy I used last week, paid off. I'm going to go back to that well. These two are going to have to really step it up. And if it is Jake Locker, Nate Washington's very interesting. Those two always have a good connection, always seems to look for him. So if Locker's in, I do like Washington. If it's Mettenberger, I'm more focused on Delaney Walker and Kendall Wright. Running game, I have not used Bishop Sankey all year. I lit into him on the Sirius radio show a couple weeks ago, and I'm going to stick by that. Not a guy that I like. I don't think he's a good running back, and I'll continue to avoid him. He could be minimum salary in the best matchup. I still don't want him.
Yeah, it is a pretty decent matchup against the Giants here, but I'm with you. I'm not touching him either. Boggs, let's talk about the Giants here. Real quick on the running back situation. Rashad Jennings, he did not practice today. It's going to be very iffy for him to play, I think, this Sunday. So that has Andre Williams creeping into the picture. Are you interested there, or are you more interested in Odell Beckham, maybe some Eli Manning, and Larry Donnell?
Well, you know, I'm going to disagree with you, but I think that Jennings is going to be fine for this game. 100% good to go. I obviously, you know, don't have a confirmed report on that or anything, but, you know, if you went back and if you were watching that game back on Sunday, his injury didn't appear that serious. The only thing that was concerning was that he didn't come back, like, late in that game when they needed him. That being said, it seemed like, you know, just a minor ankle sprain, not like a high ankle sprain or anything like that. So I think he's going to be good to go. You know, Andre Williams had been starting to creep in to his carries a bit there, which makes sense since the Giants are pretty much out of it. They want to see what they've got with this kid, you know, kind of trying to get him more experience. But either way, I think that Jennings is a guy you've got to target because the Tennessee Titans have arguably the worst run defense in the league.
For sure.
On top of that, they can get beaten through the air too. So there's a lot to love. I actually don't mind Eli Manning this week at 6,900. He's going to be, you know, probably targeting both Ruben Randall and Odell Beckham. I guess the good thing about that is the reason why I'm all over Beckham this week is because he's obviously the big deep threat receiver. He's going to have a few cracks at our good friend Bleedy Ray Wilson. So I think he's got some big play potential in him this week. I think a lot of people with that recency bias saying, you know, he didn't catch a touchdown last week. He still had 7 catches for 90 yards. You know, I'd take that any day of the week. You throw a touchdown in there, and he's a solid play. So he's getting targeted. He's going to be involved. I think he's back in play. The one curious one that I can't figure out is Larry Donnell. You know, I'm actually kind of interested
in your guys' thoughts. He just likes to fumble and fumble and fumble, but Tom Coughlin loves passing to the tight end, so he just keeps getting the ball.
Well, I mean, there's just no other options. That's why he still gets, you know, the playing time. But I just don't know if I can trust him this week. His price is tempting. It's a good matchup. I think there's going to be some offense in this game both ways. I just don't have a good take on him or a good read on Larry Donnell.
Let's go to the next game here. We've got Carolina at New Orleans. Beer, we saw what the Vikings did to Carolina last week. You have to like the typical players on New Orleans this week. Drew Brees off a monster game on the road. This week he's at home. Mark Ingram, there is some more competition, I think, coming back to the backfield. I'm going to be avoiding the running game. But Kenny Stills, Jimmy Graham had a zero burger. Drew Brees threw 5 touchdowns. Jimmy Graham didn't have a reception. I think a lot of people are going to be burnt by that, and I'm looking to deploy Jimmy Graham all over tournaments this week.
Yeah, he's the poster boy this week for what we just talked about with Delaney Walker. He didn't get a single target, let alone a reception or a look in the red zone, nothing. Not a single look all game. So Sean Payton's a smart dude. I respect the hell out of him. I think he's a great offensive coach. I think they're going to see that, and they're going to really make Jimmy Graham a big part of this game plan. So he stands out to me. Drew Brees looks like the guy we've been waiting for. I mean, back-to-back 30-point games, 32 and 30, and the last one being on the road, which we're always concerned with Brees on the road. Now he's at home against a bad defense, a bad secondary. I think this all lines up for another big game for Drew Brees. So 9,100, not a bad price on him. I'll be using him a lot, one of my top quarterbacks of the week.
I bet I know who your top quarterback is, Beer.
Oh, yeah, you know that. I don't even need to talk about that. But, yeah, I think Graham definitely in a great bounce-back spot. And Kenny Stills, it's hard to argue the production. I mean, the guy has been great, getting a lot of looks, a lot of targets. I know his touchdown last week kind of fluky as he's running down the sideline by himself. But even without that, still put up a big game. So 6K is getting up there. Colston at 45 could be your value play there. Stills will still be popular. Colston, he's been all right. He is what he is. There's not a huge upside there, but 4,500, that's not a bad price on him. So I'm all over this passing game, as you can see. Love me some Brees to Graham, mixing in the other two guys. I'll still use some Ingram. I know you said you're going to avoid him, Britt, but not a bad matchup against Carolina there either. We'll have to see, keep an eye on who's coming back. If everybody's back healthy, then it's tough for me to always roster a Saints running back. You just never know who it's going to be. So that one will have to take a wait-and-see approach. But give me all the passing game there for New Orleans.
Yeah, I love Kenny Stills. He's taken over. He has that big playability, but he's taken over running those intermediate routes. I still love Kenny Stills, even at his price this week. What about New Orleans D? Any interest there after just the whooping Minnesota put on Carolina?
A little bit. I mean, it's a good matchup for them. It's a tough place to play, but they just haven't done anything all year. They haven't been the D that we saw, was it last year or 2 years ago, that really looked good. To me, they're an average defense, so I think Carolina can come in and do a little bit of damage here.
Boggs, the Carolina side of the ball, can you trust any of these guys? You know, it's a game where they're probably going to have to try to score a lot of points. Can you trust Cam Newton, Kelvin Benjamin? I think you can make a case for him in tournaments, but in cash games, I cannot touch any part of this Carolina offense, except maybe the running backs. Isn't one of the running backs out? Maybe you can inform everyone on that situation.
Sure. Well, DeAngelo Williams, I think he fractured, one of his fingers or part of his hand in last week, which is going to put his status for this week in jeopardy. If he's out, I actually don't mind Jonathan Stewart. He's got a rock bottom price.
3,800. You're going to need saving somewhere.
Yeah, and
I could support Jonathan Stewart as a value play for sure, if DeAngelo Williams is out.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the only case, because if DeAngelo Williams is in there, it's going to be a timeshare. In which case, we don't dick around with that. But if Jonathan Stewart's going to be that guy, I think he's a terrific play at $3,800. So much that I'd even throw him in a cash game because he's going to be in there. Regardless of the situation, whether it's late and they're down by 100, which is what I think the way this game's going to go. And I want to touch on something in a second on the New Orleans side, but that's about it because I think that Cam Newton is going to be under siege the entire game. I think that a couple, dump-off screens to Jonathan Stewart could be in order for this week. I think the Saints are absolutely going to smoke Carolina, so you could look and see about garbage time, this and that, but, it used to be Kelvin Benjamin was the only guy in that whole offense outside of Greg Olsen, but there's been an emerging guy. It's Philly Brown, and he's got back-to-back games with a touchdown. I can't trust him enough, but he's minimum price, kind of emerging as that second receiving option. I still don't think Carolina has any chance in this game, so it scares me, but I'm not paying up for Benjamin. I'm not going Cam Newton. And the only guy I like from Carolina is Jonathan Stewart. And quickly to your point, I do want to agree with you guys on Jimmy Graham. The reason he wasn't targeted last week is because he was being covered by Torrey Polamalu. He was just being shadowed by him the entire game. So you're absolutely right when you say Peyton, a smart guy, they won the game probably because they didn't try and force the ball to Jimmy Graham, which left a bunch of other receivers open like Stills. But as far as the running backs are concerned, if New Orleans gets a lead, I think I've cracked it. At least hear me out here. If New Orleans gets a big lead,
how many beers have you had to drink before this show, Box?
No.
You were at work, so you're probably sober.
Exactly. I wish I had a beer right now. But if New Orleans has a lead, it's going to be the Ingram show. If they're playing from behind or if it's a tight game, then you're going to see other running backs get mixed in. And if they're playing from behind, you're going to see the Cadet and more Pierre Thomas. So I think a New Orleans stack this week of Breeze, Stills, Graham, and even Breeze, Stills, and Ingram could be an interesting play because, like I said, I think New Orleans is absolutely going to blow them out. And I agree with you. I agree with you, Britt, that I think New Orleans D is an intriguing play this week for tournaments.
Let's go to the most anticipated game of the century, guys. It's the Jets at the Vikings. I want no part of this game from both of you guys. I have no interest.
We just move on.
In any player.
Does anybody have an argument there?
I do want to touch with you here. Well, I don't want to touch you, Beer, but I want to touch on a subject here with you. The Vikings D against the Jets. We saw what they did last week. I want to ask you this: the Jets, it looks like they're going to do this ground and pound. We saw with the Dolphins D. There's just no chance for Geno Smith interceptions. There's no chances for pick sixes. Is the Vikings D someone you're heavily targeting this week?
Not heavily targeting. They're on my radar. I had them last week and it worked out. They're a better D at home. I mean, you go through their game logs. I mean, they held Aaron Rodgers in check pretty much that game. They almost won that game. So they're a better team at home. They play a little bit more inspired. That being said, to your point, we saw the Jets and what they want to do. I mean, I think they ran 24 out of 26 plays were running plays at one point in that game against Miami. So I think they're going to take the ball out of Geno's hands and use these running backs, which is what they should do. I mean, you got Chris Ivory. Chris Johnson looked great on a few of those runs. Looked like the guy from Tennessee a few years ago. Hammer these running backs in there. Let Geno make the easy throws. So I don't think there's going to be the big turnovers and everything from Geno. Minnesota's not going to put up enough points to force the Jets to play behind. So there's nothing here on either side. I mean, if somebody wants to say the Percy Harvin revenge card, have fun with that because they're not using him the way he should be.
Unless he gets 10 rushes, there's going to be no revenge.
Exactly. So I don't want that'd be the worst narrative street or whatever you want to call it that you could pull out. So
I'm sure my buddy Dean will mention the revenge of Percy Harvin. He loves the revenges and the narratives.
Yeah, then he can roster them and good luck with that. So I'm just not seeing either side here. Maybe Boggs has got something, but this is ugly.
Boggs, you got any tricks up your sleeve there, Boggs?
No, nothing. I can't justify playing any single Jet player this week. What
about a running back?
Sure.
How much do you want to run? Do you want to maybe a Chris Ivory? I'm not buying this Chris Johnson at all. But Chris Ivory, I could see he runs so hard. The Vikings pretty good against the run. The Dolphins were, and the Jets had their way with them. Any interest there? I'm just not seeing it this week.
No, because Minnesota knows that the Jets are going to try and run the ball. They're going to make them beat them through the air. They're just going to stack the box. It's going to be an ugly game for both sides, in my opinion. I think this is like a 13-7 game or 13-6 game. I want no part of it. And if Chris Johnson was out and it was all Ivory, then you can make a case. But when you have guys cutting into the share and the workload, it limits their upside. And when I don't think that upside is very high to start, it also lowers their floor. So I have no interest in this game.
0-0.
It's going to be a tie, 0-0. That would be very fitting. I want the Vikings to win like 7-0. The Jets don't deserve to win. So 7-0 Vikings. Ravens at Dolphins here, Beer. I think Tannehill, Wallace, Landry, all these guys are back in play after a down week last week. We saw what the Chargers did to the Ravens, and I really like this passing game for the Dolphins at home. Jarvis Landry is a PPR machine. I really like him over Mike Wallace this week.
Yeah, Wallace's price came up. I know he was super cheap last week on DraftKings, so their pricing is close enough now. I prefer Landry as well. I mean, Tannehill really looks for this guy a lot. Like you said, a PPR monster, gets a ton of receptions. and really looking like the real deal here. So slowly starting to evolve into that number one threat and pushing Wallace back to basically his Pittsburgh role. So he's basically the highest priced deep threat in the league at this point. Is basically that's his game. I mean, they wanted Mike Wallace to turn into this all-around receiver. That's not him. That's not his game. Or Landry running all these different routes and looking good after the catch. I mean, he returns kicks for them, so there's always that bonus if you want to tie him to the Dolphins D. I did that in a bunch of lineups last week. I mean, it didn't work out, but it's always a possibility and something to think about under the radar. So I like Landry a lot here against Baltimore secondary. I think Tannehill's in a great spot back at home. Baltimore more susceptible to the pass than they are the run. So
not just more. They're the worst team against the pass this year. They give up the most fantasy points to wide receivers. Without Jimmy Smith, they have just fallen apart. I absolutely love Jarvis Landry this week.
Yeah, I'm with you. So Lamar Miller's the interesting one. Baltimore is very good against the run, but 4,500 is not a bad price for a guy going to get a lot of carries. In a tournament, we know his upside's limited, but if you need to save a little bit in cash games, don't write him off. Not my favorite play, but he does provide you some salary relief, and we know he's going to get 15, 17 touches. Should be able to pay off 4,500 even against a tough Baltimore team, but that one's just a shot in the dark. I think the passing game's where you want to look here.
Boggs, let's go to the other side of the ball with the Ravens. Do you have any interest? We saw the Jets, they really ran all over the Dolphins in their supposed tough run defense. Do you think the Ravens are going to be able to do that with Justin Forsett? He's leading the league in yards per carry. He's kind of emerged as this, a very top-tier fantasy play. Or are you more on Flacco and the Smiths this week?
It's tough because, I actually do believe in Miami's defense in general. It's a tough spot for them. I think that if Miami can get out to a quick, early lead in this game, that they'll be able to control the entire game, which just, kind of, inhibits what Forsett can do. That being said, he's the only guy that I'm going to be rolling with this week. Miami's got a terrific, core of defensive backs. I think Flacco's going to struggle with the pass rush that Miami has. And I think that if there's anyone that you want to play, it's Forsett in this game, but I don't love him. Like I said, I think I'd rather play Trey Mason over him this week based on the matchup. But it's hard to argue, like you said, what Forsett's been doing. So if there's one guy that I do like, it's Forsett. I just don't like him as much as I normally would in a better matchup.
If you had to pick one of the receivers, Torrey Smith or Steve Smith, Torrey Smith is quietly... he's not having these huge games, but he's kind of creeping his way back up there to be a top fantasy receiver again. He's scoring a touchdown just about every week.
If I had to pick one of the receivers, who knows, man? He left the game last week. They say it's not going to be a big deal. Steve Smith's breaking down, just like I predicted to you guys. He might have a big deep threat in him, but Torrey Smith's the guy that's getting the target, so. Why break, but don't break what's fit. How does this saying go?
Don't break what isn't broken.
Yeah, something like that. You can't. Yeah, whatever. I'm sorry, but Torrey Smith's the guy. He's going to be the guy moving forward. But I don't like him at all this week.
I just want to point out that tonight's NBA night is just absolutely crazy. If you want to take a look at the worst lineup of the night, I will. Maybe I'll show everyone my lineup because I think everyone I have in my lineup is tanking so bad right now. I'm just after the show, I'm just going to go into the corner and cry all my dollars away. Colts at Browns here, Beer. Brian Hoyer, he's got named the starter. I want to ask you, can you trust him? If he has a bad first quarter and a half, I think he could easily get yanked out of this game for Johnny Football. I cannot use Brian Hoyer in cash games, even at his cheap price. It looks to be a very good matchup with Vontae Davis. Looks like he might be out with a concussion. What's your take on this Hoyer situation at quarterback?
I was all ready to talk some Johnny Football.
Everybody was.
No,
everyone was just waiting for it.
I read an interesting tweet, and I forget who it was, but somebody I respect a lot just can't think of the name right now, but he laid it out perfectly with this situation, and I've heard this before, is that if the Browns go to Manziel, there's no turning back. That's it. You can't put him in and take him out. Like, once you stick him in there and he's your starter, he's your guy. That's it. So with Hoyer, they can yank him in and out and bring in Manziel and do the, they don't have to commit to Hoyer. Obviously, Manziel's the future, but I think they really want to get through this year, get him a year under his belt of watching the game before they're going to go there. So anyway, I thought that was a good point, and I think that's basically what they've been doing now with Hoyer. I guess I don't trust the guy.
I can't use him in a cash game. In a tournament at 5,200, I can do it. But I just worry that if he has a bad first quarter, say he has 20 yards and he throws a bad pick, he can get yanked right out of there very quickly, I think, in this game.
That's the problem. So I'm looking at other directions. I like their offense here because the Colts are going to score. They're going to have to keep up. So Isaiah Correll's a guy, I think, another guy in for a bounce-back spot. I know he's a little banged up. It's early in the week, so keep an eye on that. If he's out, word is it's Terrence West, then I kind of lose interest in the Browns' backfield. I don't think West is a very good player.
Shane Drone, I don't even think he's available. They just signed him. Is he on any of these sites anywhere?
I highly doubt it. And I know there was another guy that behind those two, Winston maybe his name was, that they wanted to look at. So if it's not Crowell, I'm not interested there. The thing to watch here is going to be Vontae Davis, because if he's out, Josh Gordon's going to eat this team for breakfast, lunch, dinner, dessert, fourth meal, fifth meal, whatever you want to call it. He's going to tear them up. So that's the most interested in. So it doesn't sound like Davis is going to play. Obviously, something you're going to have to keep an eye on. But I love me some Josh Gordon and some Crowell this week. Keep an eye on Jordan Cameron if he returns. Cheap salaries all across the industry, but give me those two guys, especially Gordon. He's a top 2-3 option, in my opinion, if Davis is out.
Yeah, so you got Josh Gordon and Jordy Nelson. They're both 8,100 on DraftKings. Very tough to roster both of them. If you had to pick one this week, who would be taken? Consider, let's say Vontae Davis is out here.
Oh, you're putting me to the test here. I'm going to go Gordon, surprisingly.
Man, I don't know.
He's the only show in town. With
I think
we'll get to Green Bay, but I think they're going to tear that team up on the ground. I think this is an Eddie Lacy game. Obviously, Rodgers, Nelson, Cobb, always going to get their numbers, but I would go Gordon if there's no Davis. It's close. I mean, I like them both, but
Boggs, same question to you, real quick.
Yeah.
What did I have there? Gordon or Jordy Nelson if Vontae Davis is out?
Josh Gordon.
Yeah, this Josh Gordon hype train is about to take off this week if Vontae Davis is out. So let's go to the Colts side here, Boggs. Luck's in play. Are you tempering your expectations with Joe Hayden? He's probably going to be on T.Y. Hilton. Does that mean Reggie Wayne, Dante Moncrief maybe have a bigger game? Looks like Dwayne Allen's probably going to be back. So the tight end situation, I'm going to be avoiding. Fleener had a nice little run. But now it's just going to be who gets the touchdown. There's not enough passes to go around to make him PPR worthy. And Dan Herron, are you on board with him as a kind of a mid-tier value play? He's easily the better running back than Trent Richardson. However, the coach and the owner seem to want to keep giving Trent Richardson some more run.
Yeah, that's the only issue right there. Herron, most of his production came off big play last week, but obviously looks like he's a little bit of a better running back than Trent Richardson, who
it's not a very tough thing to be.
Exactly. Is it Trent Richardson revenge week, or is that ship sailed? Because there could be some interesting hot takes there if that's what you want to go. But I really think, and you won't say this often, this entire game, the way it's going to go, the game script, I think, revolves around whether Vontae Davis plays or not. And unfortunately, we probably won't know right up until game time. So it's kind of hard, for me to go with who I like. But if Vontae Davis is out, then I think Luck is in play as a great, he's in play every week. But I think that ups his value because they're probably going to get torched, Indianapolis, and they're going to be playing from behind. In which case, I would like Dan Herron, Boom Herron. But with T.Y. Hilton kind of banged up, Moncrief, I don't know if I can trust him. He had obviously a huge week last week. He probably has the best matchup this week. As that second receiver going up against Buster Screen, who's started the season off well, but has been pretty bad recently. That's probably the only thing I would like. T.Y. Hilton's probably going to get a ton of, Joe Hayden, and Reggie Wayne doesn't have that, high upside anymore. I think he'd be a safer type cash game play in the slot. I'm not touching Kobe Fleener. I didn't have any of him last week, which kind of hurt, but at the same time, I just don't think he's worth that price tag. And, if Vontae Davis is in, I don't hate the Colts D as a GPP play, but if he's out, it's all the Browns, and I think the Browns are going to smoke him.
Man, that's what's the line in this game? Let me bring it up here. It is a 49.5. Colts only favored by 3.5 right now, so maybe that wouldn't be too surprising to Vegas if the Browns happen to win that game. So
yeah.
Not as bold of a call as I thought it was. I figured that line might have been a little bit higher. Bucks at Lions. Beer at Stafford, and it's Calvin Johnson in this game, right? Did you click? Hey, Beer, you might be on mute if you can hear me.
Again, there's that kid thing coming into play. So good call. I'm just sitting here talking away about Calvin Johnson, and nobody can hear me. So he's my number one receiver this week. To me, I like Gordon, I like Jordy, but Calvin looked like Calvin on Thanksgiving. Healthy, unstoppable. Tampa Bay, one of the worst teams against the receiver. Who's going to guard him is my question. Whether it's zone, man-to-man.
That cover 2 is going to guard him.
Exactly. So no one's going to guard him. He's great at finding those holes, those 15-yard slants and deep balls. He's unstoppable. So Calvin is a monster, had a big game Thanksgiving. I think that you're going to continue to see these big games as this team pushes towards the playoffs. Stafford looked great as well on Thanksgiving. So if we get the good Stafford to Calvin here, it could be a dangerous combo in GPPs. I think Golden Tate's in play as well, finding those holes in that zone. So those are my main targets here. The running game for Detroit, it's hard to trust. I had some joy on Thanksgiving just because there weren't many other options with only 3 games. But if Reggie Bush is back, it just kind of throws a wrench into everything, and I'll pretty much avoid the running game there. But all the Calvin and Stafford and a bunch of Golden Tate too.
The Bucs defense has looked a tiny bit better against the pass. They were really exploitable in the first part of the season. They're starting to get a little bit better, but I'm not buying too much into that with Calvin Johnson, them going to Detroit. Love Stafford to Calvin this week. Boggs, the other side of the ball, McCown to Evans, Vincent Jackson. I really don't want any part of Doug Martin or whoever the Bucs kind of throw out there at halfback. Do you even have any interest in McCown or Evans, V-Jacks? I just don't see it this week.
Nope, this is not the week for any of those guys. Evans is the guy, but he's going to have a tough time. McCown's going to be running for his dear life, and the running game isn't going to get anything. So Detroit D, lock and load them up, guys.
Let's go to the next game. We've got Texans at Jaguars. Blake Bortles, can you use him, Beer, against Texans here? Denard Robinson, Shorts, Hearns Lee. It's just a mess. I'm going to be avoiding this week. I can't use any of these Jags, even at home.
I'm going to target some of the receivers. I liked what I saw out of Marquise Lee last week, and Houston, as we know, the worst team against the receiver position. We saw, the Titans even have some success against them last week. So I'll be mixing in these guys. The problem is it's hard to predict which one it's going to be, if any of them at all. So that's the interesting thing. But the prices here, tough to beat. I mean, Shorts 3,900, Lee 3,900, Hearns 3,800. So I think they all have
one of them is probably going to have a good game.
Right. So it's just predicting which one. So if you're not sure, maybe mix and match. If you're making multiple lineups, I think it's going to be Lee. I think he looked good. I think him and Bortles have a good connection there. But again, is it a Shorts week? They all seem to get about 7-8 targets per week. So hard to say, but I think there is some upside there against Houston. Again, we saw it last week with Tennessee. Bortles, I think, falls in that same Locker, Mettenberger, Colt McCoy category. I mean, if you really need salary relief, you take a shot at these guys, and hopefully you get a Ryan Fitzpatrick performance with 6 touchdowns. But I'm not too high on Bortles, but I will be mixing in these receivers. Denard Robinson, not a bad price on him either. I think he could be in for a bounce-back spot here, even against Houston. So I think they can keep this game close, possibly even win the game. So don't write off Jacksonville completely. I think it's going to be much closer than people think.
Blake Bortles, I believe, is Pro Football Focus's worst starting quarterback in this year, and in terms of
I wouldn't disagree with that.
The Jags, they thought they found their quarterback of the future, and I think they just need to. I'm not sure it's going to be Blake Bortles, so they might need to go back to the well a little sooner than I thought they might have to there. Boggs, the Texans here. It's clear to me a receiver. Hopkins has easily taken over Andre Johnson. I want DeAndre Hopkins in that battle every single week now. But the guy I'm really targeting this week, Arian Foster, I love him against the Jags. I was big on Fitz. I had him in my FanDuel cash games last week. I couldn't pull the trigger on DraftKings, and it burnt me. But at $5,000 on FanDuel last week, he was just too cheap for me to ignore. This week, I'm not expecting 6 touchdowns, but I think he might be able to have a good game. What do you think?
I don't know. I don't know if I can trust old Fitz magic.
All the Arian Foster, though.
Exactly. Yeah, it's all Arian Foster. I think that with so many people gonna try and run back that Fitzpatrick and DeAndre Hopkins combination, you got to realize that Hopkins' production relies solely on his quarterback getting him the ball, and Jacksonville, it is a good matchup, but the cornerback he's likely going up against, Hopkins, has been pretty sneaky good recently. I'm not saying he's a terrible play, but I'm saying because of his ownership percentage, I'm going to have 0 shares of him. And I'm not buying the Fitzpatrick. If he was still around that same price range, yeah, then we could talk. But I think with so many people expecting that to come back to them, I think Arian Foster is going to fly under the radar. And especially at his price, I think this is an Arian Foster game. I just think that this is going to be one of those lower scoring games where you see Arian Foster go for $150 and maybe a couple touchdowns. But he's, I'm not worried about his health. He was, back in full last week, so I think he's good to go to light him up in your lineups again this week.
Yeah, Fitzpatrick at 6,400 on DraftKings. Give me Colt McCoy at 6,000 if I'm spending down. Maybe even a Cam Newton a little bit at 6,700. He always seems to scrounge up his way. Might have a little upside if Kelvin Benjamin can catch a touchdown for once, or a couple other guys just a few bucks more than him. He's kind of in this no man's land for me at 6,400 this week. Love Arian Foster though. He is right behind Bell as your number 2 halfback of the week. Boggs.
Well, yeah, if we're not talking the Thursday slate, then yeah, he absolutely would be.
Bills at Broncos next game here, Beer. What's your take on the Broncos this week? The Bills, pretty decent defense most of the weeks, but they got to travel all the way to the other side of the country. They got to take on Peyton Manning. C.J. Anderson is kind of turned into. It doesn't really matter who the running back is for the Broncos. When you're the running back for Peyton Manning, you're pretty much always going to have a great game because everyone's worried about the pass. You got to love all the Broncos this week. Julius Thomas also looking like he might be back this week.
Buffalo's going to get smoked in this one. I know they've been a good team and they've kind of hung around the playoff race, but A, they're a better team at home, and B, this is Denver at home. The Denver offense, pretty much unstoppable at home. I don't care who you throw out there. So this doesn't require every week. It's play all your Broncos if you can get them in. Manning's a top 3 quarterback. C.J. Anderson, to me, is the best running back of the 3. I don't think it's just a plug-and-play situation. I think he's that much of a better player than Ronnie Hillman and Monte Ball, and he's really starting to show it. I know there's a lot of hype on Anderson for the last 2 years. Finally getting his opportunity, and I don't think he's going to turn back. This is his job going forward, and I think people will avoid him this week looking at the numbers. Buffalo's a good run D, blah, 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 blah. Give me all the C.J. Anderson. His prices are too low. The guy is a stud week in, week out, 20 points a week. Catches the ball, runs the ball. They're going to score a ton of points. I'm going to continue to go back to that well until they price him accordingly on all the sites, and that just hasn't happened yet. So he's a target of mine. Manning at home, always a target. Of course, the receivers are in play, and you wait to hear on Julius Thomas, but his price makes him attractive as well. But Denver going to roll in this one. Anderson, my favorite target here in this game.
If Julius Thomas goes, he was limited today. If you ask me, signs are pointing to him playing. He's 5,200. Do you want him or a guy like what do we got? Jason Witten or Antonio Gates at 4,700, or do you even go down cheaper?
I am really, really high on Antonio Gates this week, so that's probably the route that I would go. Julius coming off the injury. I don't know that they'd throw him out there, especially if the game gets out of hand. He won't be out there for much time at all, so I think they'll get him out there, get him loosened up if he plays. So he's an option, but I think there's other guys that I would gravitate to.
Boggs, the other side of the ball here, the Bills are going to probably be passing a lot. I don't expect to see too much running, but that don't count out Fred Jackson there. He excels in the pass game. And Kyle Orton, Sammy Watkins, Woods, you got Hulk Hogan out there. Any of these guys interesting you?
Kyle Orton revenge game.
Brett, I think you are the only person in this entire world that likes Fred Jackson. I don't even think his mom plays him in fantasy. I mean, you say it every week. The guy sucks. I mean, he what's his season?
He's old.
Yeah, he's old. He's slow. Sure, he's involved in the passing game. Sure, he has a moderately high floor, but what's his upside? 20 points? It's not happening this week.
He had 25.2 DraftKings points against your San Diego Chargers in Week 3. That was a long time ago for an old man, though.
Yeah, and they lost. So that's all I got to say about that. But the only guy I'm going to be targeting in this game is Robert Woods for garbage time. I am in a complete agreement with Beer Maker's fan on the Denver side. I think this is a big-time Denver blowout. The one thing I will say is that Demaryius Thomas has got to be your number one wide receiver of the week. He's going to absolutely go off, in my opinion. But I do like Anderson as well. But yeah, for Buffalo, it's Robert Woods, and that's for only for garbage time.
Let me find their prices up here on DraftKings. I got Woods 4,500, very reasonable. Sammy Watkins 5,800. He's just getting a lot of targets, but he's not doing too much with them lately. I think I would take Woods over Watkins there, especially given that $1,300 price difference. So I'm right there with you. Next game, Chiefs at Cards Beer. This is another game similar to this Minnesota at Jets game. I just want pretty much no part of this game from either side. Ellington looks like he might be hurt, but I don't want to use Marion Grice. That doesn't sound very interesting to me. Stanton, he's not a very good quarterback, and I just want no part of these Cardinals.
Yeah, this game, I think this would be a fun one to watch. I think this could be a slugfest, a lower scoring. What's the over-under, like 40, 41 in this game?
10.
So, right, that's what it should be. At first thought, I thought the over-under would be like 25.
40.5.
What is it, 40 and a half?
Yeah.
Yeah, even that. I like the 10 number better, and I think that's what we could see here. So it's tough. I mean, Arizona, what is there? The receivers, who do you trust? Fitzgerald, Floyd, Brown? No. Ellington has not.
I don't trust anyone with Drew Stanton at quarterback. They're all off limits to me now.
Right, and you'd think it would set up for success. Bruce Arians throwing the ball down the field, but these are two similar teams, two smash-mouth defensive teams, want to run the ball. And if there's no Ellington, Grice, like you said, that's not very interesting there. So I think I'm not going to have much exposure to this game at all. Maybe a little Jamal Charles, just because I don't think he'll be highly owned. But even that, it's tough to take anyone out of this game.
Boggs, the one part the Cardinals have been susceptible to is the tight end. You got Travis Kelce there. He's playing about 80% of the snaps now. Just hasn't turned into any kind of performance because you have Alex Smith as your quarterback, and he doesn't really throw the ball more than 10 yards down the field. Do you have any interest in any of these Chiefs this week?
Not really. Not on the onset of things. I mean, Kelce, he's getting more and more snaps, but the production still sucks. So, I mean, I've pretty much written him off at this point. I had him in a couple spots last week. There was never a week for him to go off. It was when they were trailing, and they still, refused to give him the ball. So, a matchup against the Cardinals, could be the difference maker. We say it every week, but I'm not playing this guy in my cash games, similar to the way your thoughts are on Kaepernick, who we'll get to here in a sec. But the intriguing question for me, or the player for me, is Jamal Charles. I mean, it's obviously a difficult matchup. His price really hasn't come down that much. He's still priced up there, along with some of these other guys. But he's a guy that's still going to get the ball, and he's going to
the only offense they have.
Exactly. So I don't hate him as a kind of contrarian GPP play. I think there is some upside there if he's able to slip past a couple defenders. But I'm not targeting any receivers. Ain't going with Alex Smith. Kelsey, Jamal Charles, it pretty much stays the same. And I'm not going with the Chiefs D, even in what I think is a low-scoring game. I just don't see a whole lot of points, turnovers, or anything in this game. I think this is the most boring game of the week outside of that Jets game.
Next game, Seattle at Philadelphia Beer. Can you trust any of these Eagles against the Seattle defense? It is going to be on the road, so they're not going to have the 12th man there in Seattle helping them out. Do you have any interest in these Eagles? Maybe a Jordan Matthews, maybe a McCoy? Any interest for you?
Yeah, you named the two guys I'm looking at, McCoy and Matthews. The once vaunted Seattle run D. Now, I mean, they're outside the top 10 according to fantasy points, and they've given up some big games. McCoy's looked more like the McCoy we come to know over the last couple weeks. And Seattle's
cheap too.
What's that?
He's still cheap, 6,400.
Yeah, so don't be afraid at Seattle. So I love getting running backs against Seattle because everyone just writes them off instantly. Like, nope, not taking anyone against Seattle. McCoy will give them fits in the passing game. They've struggled with passing game running backs as well. One of the worst teams against the pass in the running back department. So he's certainly a target of mine at his price. And I think Macklin's going to get the Sherman treatment, which we know Sanchez to Matthews has been money. So I don't think they would put Sherman on Matthews. Maybe I'm wrong. But if that's the case, if they do have him on Macklin, I think that connection can still have some success here. So not as high on Sanchez, but I think Matthews is still in play along with McCoy. Those are the two targets for me.
Eagles D special teams, any interest there? They do have that uncanny ability to score a lot of touchdowns.
Not so much. They've had a good run. They've been great, especially at home, and put up some big numbers. But I think Seattle can put up some points in this game as well. So I think this could be a higher scoring game. I'm going to stay away from the defenses.
Boggs, let's talk about Seattle. There's one play I really like in this game, and that's Russell Wilson with his ability to run and pass in an up-tempo game. He's probably going to see some more snaps than he normally would. Would you have confidence rostering Russell Wilson this week?
Yeah, absolutely. With more snaps, more times with the possession, a guy that doesn't turn the ball over and likes to run with it, I think Russell Wilson is, going to be in the top 5 for me this week in terms of quarterbacks. And there's some pretty good guys with some good matchups. I just really love his potential, and what he's capable of doing with his legs against that Philly defense. So it's tough for me to pinpoint where he's going to go with the ball, because Doug Baldwin is a slot receiver, and he's going to get up against Boykin. So if I had to pick a guy that I think could have a decent game, it's Curse. But I'm not even going to mess around with that. That's the beauty of taking Russell Wilson, is he spreads the ball around, which sucks for his receivers. But for him, he gets the production, and you don't have to worry about tying him or picking and choosing between guys, since they all get a pretty decent amount of share of the workload. So this is a tough game. This is gonna be one of the better games in my opinion. I think that there's gonna be some high scoring in this game, because I agree with your guys' points on the Philly guys. But yeah, and that Philly defense, be careful. Don't use them this week, in my opinion, because Russell Wilson, he's an efficient quarterback. Giving him the ball more only hurts them. I think this is a higher scoring game, and I think Seattle might be able to squeak out a victory here, but it's still a little bit too early for me to tell. But I do love Russell Wilson.
Yeah, I'm going to go back to you on the next game first, because we're talking about these quarterbacks that are mobile and don't turn the ball over, and we have the exact opposite with the Niners in Oakland. Let's talk about the Niners here. It is a great matchup for them with Frank Gore, Colin Kaepernick. You think they'd be able to have a good game. I want absolutely no interest in these Niners this week. What are you? I cannot roster Colin Kaepernick this week.
You going back to me with this one?
Yeah, let's. I
Yeah.
want to hear your talks. Compare
Well,
him to Russell Wilson.
This is a tough one because I think Narrative Street gets involved big time for this one. Obviously these two teams are big rivals. That's not what I'm talking about, but the reports are that the Raiders are going to trade for Jim Harbaugh, and he's a guy that obviously is probably pissed off about that. I think that he's going to try and make a statement. That being said, I don't know how he's going to do it because you look at guys like Frank Gore, who I think they should ground and pound.
Can you chase? You saw what Trey Mason did last week. Are you chasing that with Frank Gore and Carlos Hyde?
Well, I'm not going with Hyde. Gore's still getting the majority of the workload. He's just had some tough matchups. He's obviously losing some steam, but that offensive line should have no problems going against the Raiders. So I think Frank Gore's in for a decent game here, and I love him at that price. A little worried about his upside, but again, I think he's one of your safer plays at the running back position this week if you're looking
If
to
you
stay.
had to pick, let's say D'Angelo Williams is out, so you got Jonathan Stewart at 3,800. You got Frank Gore at 4,800. You can only pick one of those two. There's not really a lot I'm seeing in the middle between those two that make a lot of sense. Maybe a Chris Ivory. Take price into consideration. Who would you be taking there?
I'll take Gore just simply because I expect the Niners to get a lead and be winning and be feeding him the ball to run out the clock as opposed to the other situation with Stewart, who I think will be down 21-0 after the New Orleans first three possessions. So, I mean, again, I think New Orleans are going to get blown out. So I'm going to go with Gore in that debate.
Do you have any interest in the Niners' defense on the road in Oakland? I think they make a very solid play this week.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not like they're traveling, a long distance. The black hole, it's going to be wild, it's going to be crazy, but it's not like they're going into a completely different environment. They're just hopping on the BART going across the bay. So it's essentially a home game for the Niners in terms of the weather, the time, all of that. I love the Niners D this week. Very expensive, but there's a lot of potential there. I'm curious of your guys' thoughts. Are any of these receivers, like a Crabtree, intriguing you, or even a Vernon Davis, trying to get him going? I know Bolden's probably the safer option, but I'm curious to hear if you think Crabtree or Vernon Davis could have a decent game.
Me personally, I'm avoiding the receivers. Oakland's usually pretty decent against the pass. They're very heavily exploitable versus the run. I just can't bring myself to really roster any of these guys. Just how up and down Frank Gore's been, even in a good matchup. I just can't trust him. So maybe I'll ask Beer Makers fan. What's your take on Frank Gore?
I'm kind of with Boggs there. It's tough to, which guy is it going to be? I think Bolden's a safe guy. Crabtree, is there some upside there? And at the same point to what Britt said, Oakland pretty good against receivers. So now my one thing here, I know Frank Gore, there's a lot of love, and Boggs, you called him safe. I don't know if safe is a word I agree with. I get the game script should be run. But do you really think he's a safe play?
Not when you're averaging. What is he averaging? Maybe like 3.5 something yards a carry. I mean, his game looks like.
Hasn't looked like. I know the matchup is ideal, and you would think they're going to pound this team into the ground. He to me is more of a tournament play. Honestly, I don't know if safe's the. But
hey, at that price, man, I'm locking and loading, and he's still getting the carries. It's not like it's necessarily a 50-50 timeshare. Obviously, Hyde's going to get some work. Could vulture a touchdown from him, but I just think that San Francisco is going to try and dominate this game, and if they're going to do it, they're going to have to do it on the ground. I think if you put the ball in Kaepernick's hands too much, that creates turnover opportunities, which could keep Oakland in this game. So, Oakland's going to be pissed, coming off, one of the worst losses in franchise history. But I expect them to play better, and if that's the case, then San Francisco is going to need to run out the clock, which means they're going to need to feed Gore and get him going too, because that's been a big part of why they haven't had as much success, because the run game hasn't worked. But I think he's a safe play at 4,800, man. But
This Niners team is going to be a very controversial topic this week in DFS. There's going to be people who, like me, going to be staying away. There's going to be people like Boggs that like it. There'll be people in the middle. I just can't do it. I will not roster Colin Kaepernick ever again in any form of a game. I can't do it.
Didn't we talk about this? Don't let these guys burn you forever now. Come on.
Beer.
I'm just trying to talk Niners, so I don't have to talk Raiders. That's all I'm doing here. So
yeah, any interest there? Latavius Murray, he's cleared cleared to play.
No interest in any Raiders. Non-zero, not the kicker, not the defense. They got some sweet fans there with their Spikes and Legion of Doom stuff, but other than that, this could be ugly. So they always play inspired at home. Maybe they can hang in this game. That being said, there's no Raiders that I want to roster in this one.
Pats at Chargers. We're going to stick with you, Beer, here. We're going to get back on track here. You're going to steal the Chargers away from Boggs here. Keenan Allen, you think he's going to get the Revis Island treatment? I was big on Keenan Allen last week. It worked out pretty good for me. I don't think I can go back to it this week. You mentioned you like Gates earlier. I like that pick. And the running game here with Ryan Matthews. Do you think he can cause some damage against the Pats on the ground?
I want to get Boggs' take on the Chargers always. That's his team, so I want to hear his take. But here, I love Antonio Gates this week. I think Keenan Allen is scheduled to visit Revis Island, if you ask. So they're going to need some guys to step up. Who's left? You got Gates, you got Floyd, you got Royal. Floyd and Royal have their moments, but Gates is the guy that's really going to need to step up. And watching this team from afar, again, I'm not a fan, but I've always enjoyed their game, and it seems like in these type of games, the big stage, Rivers and Gates really step their game up, and I think they're going to have to do that this week. So I think going into the game plan is going to try to be to run the ball, to slow down the New England offense. So I think Matthews could have some value if they can keep this game close and stay on script. If things get out of hand, that's when it's going to go to the passing game. So Matthews, I'll mix in as a GPP. I wouldn't go there in a cash game. But Rivers to Gates, I like a lot this week, and I'll mix in some Floyd and Royal. Going to be hard for me to pull the trigger on Keenan Allen. I know he's been great. I had him a lot last week, paid himself off, but I think they're definitely going to look to take him out of the game. So that's my view from afar. Rivers and Gates are my main targets here.
Boggs, let's hear your take on the Chargers this week, and then let's talk about the Patriots. The running back situation for the Patriots is too tough for me to call. I'm just going to avoid the whole thing. Brady to Gronk, that's where I'm going to be looking. Gronk for sure. He's just getting a complete tier in himself at tight end.
Yeah, well, I was right on my Chargers again last week. I said that they'd hang in that game, and they did, and they came back and won. Hats off to them. Now they're back home, Sunday Night Football, against a team that always has had their number in the Patriots. This is going to be a career-defining game for Ryan Matthews. They're going to absolutely unleash him, in my opinion. They're going to let him run wild. So whatever he does with that will really dictate the way this game goes.
He's going to get hurt. He's going to get hurt.
Again, if he gets hurt, this is going to. I believe he's a free agent at the end of the year. They've been kind of conservative, letting him come back. I think it was, in kind of building up to this game. This is a make-or-break game for him. I think he's one of your better GPP plays of the week at his price because it's not going to necessarily burn you. He's still going to get most of the workload, if not all of it. So I do like him a lot this week, especially for tournaments. It'll be interesting to see whether Revis, steps off the island or moves the island. Because most of the season he's been, at that, I believe, right cornerback spot. And Keenan Allen's a guy that can move around. So if the Patriots want to win this game, they're going to have Revis play on the other side of the field. Because if you get Keenan Allen up against Browner, or any one of these other cornerbacks for the Patriots, then he's going to be able to do some damage. But everything really sets itself up nicely with Browner up against Floyd, Allen up against Revis, which sets it up for Antonio Gates, like Beers predicted. So it's Gates and it's Matthews. I wouldn't necessarily take both, But again, I think that Bill Belichick's really going to scheme against Phillip Rivers in this game, which is going to make it tough to pick any of the wide receivers. But Gates is in for a big game this week, and it'll be interesting to see how involved Ladarius Green gets. I don't like him at all this week, but minimum price, they could be running a lot of 2 tight end sets if they want to win this game. So that's just another thing to consider. But yeah, this is going to be a great game. And then on the New England side of the ball, it's kind of the same story. LaFell, he's going to be going up against Brandon Flowers all game long. And Flowers is the guy that can move around, so I don't like LaFell. Gronkowski, he's going to probably be shouted a lot by Eric Weddle. And Eric Weddle's also been very effective against the run. That's why the Chargers have been able to mitigate the run this season. So I think if there's one guy, it's Julian Edelman. As crazy as that sounds, he's the guy I'm going to be targeting. I don't love his price on DraftKings, but PPR monster. If he can be able to break free, I think he's going to have a decent shot going up against, I believe, Sharif Wright, who's not a very good cornerback. So Julian Edelman on the running game, I think you're going to see a little bit of Vereen, a little bit of Blunt, kind of like we've seen. So I don't really have much interest there. But yeah, I don't think this game's going to be a blowout either way. I think this is going to be one of the best Sunday Night Football games of the year. It's going to be close, and it's going to come down to a field goal as time expires.
Beer. Let's talk about your Packers to round out the Monday night game. They're facing Atlanta, and this just has complete decimation of Falcons written all over it to me.
92-0.
Very, very modest, my friend.
No, I mean they've been rolling. They look good. It was a huge win against New England. So my hope and my fear is a little bit of a letdown. Even with that, I think if there were any letdown, it'd be for a few minutes and they start rolling again. So at home, they've pretty much rolled up every team that stepped in. Now you get Atlanta. Not good against the pass, not good against the run, not good against receivers. This could be ugly. So not as a Packer fan, as an NFL fan, Green Bay's going to put some points on the board. So as I mentioned earlier, I think Eddie Lacy's a fantastic play here. Last week, puts up 12 points, 13 points, and that's a down week. Everyone's like, oh, I mean, if that's
the great
worst
week at the beginning of the year.
Right. I mean, you would have taken that in weeks 1 through 4. I would have been cheering for 12. So he's pretty much been a 20-point machine. I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity here. Obviously, Atlanta gives up a ton of rushing yards, but also the most rushing touchdowns in the league at 17, I believe it is, off the top of my head. So I think this is a Lacy game. That being said, Rodgers my number 1 quarterback. Nelson's in my top 3 receivers. Cobb always in play. Devontae Adams really stepped up last week, so I think one of you guys kind of predicted that last week. I forget which one, but kudos to you guys on that one. They should roll here. So it's like Denver. Every week, I don't see why you don't play these guys. If you can fit them in, get them in there. Should put, I would imagine, 40-plus points on the board. I don't think that's being too crazy.
You like the Packers D at all with Atlanta on the road?
I do. I like them a lot. At home, they've been great. They're causing a lot of turnovers, and I think what's going to happen here is that if they do get a lead, you're going to force Matt Ryan, who's not a good quarterback. I won't say not a good quarterback. He's a better quarterback at home. So on the road, you may put him in some spots that he's not comfortable with and trying to do too much, throwing him up to Julio and Roddy. And Green Bay's got some corners that can stick with those guys. So I do think their D is very opportunistic. I'm going to continue to go there, so I'm glad you brought that up. They're one of my favorite tournament plays, especially this week.
Boggs, the Falcons here to close it out on the road in the cold in Green Bay, coming from hot Atlanta. Do you like any of these guys this week? I'm not seeing it at all.
Oh, poor Matty Ice, man. He's going to get pounded.
He is going to be iced.
Yeah. It's I got Green Bay as my number 1 defense, and I got Denver as my number 2. That's pretty much all you need to know. I mean, the pass rush going up against Atlanta's decimated offensive line. Atlanta's going to be playing from behind. Matt Ryan, below average on the road, below average under pressure. This game, could be, like a Beer said, another one of these Monday nights where Green Bay just absolutely dominates. That's all I got.
That's going to about close it up for us guys. There's 4 or 5 more hours of Sunday, not just on Sunday, of football coverage here on Roto Grinders. Plenty of NBA coverage all week long. And guys, I got to mention one more time, make sure to go over to DraftKings, enter some of these qualifiers for that $3.1 million championship. You're going to want to try to get some of those $1,500 buy-ins later in the year. I know I'm going to be trying for them this week in all the sports, so I suggest you guys do too. Beer, anything you want to say to the people? They love seeing you on TV. They love seeing you, hearing your name on the radio. Anything you want to say to them before we head out of here?
I think they're sick of seeing me on the TV and the radio because I know I'm getting. No, I'm just playing. It's been great. But what I want to say is congrats to everybody out there on all the sites out there that's qualified for any of these live finals. It's an accomplishment.
The beach. Everyone's down in Atlantis this week for DraftKings.
Right. So it's an accomplishment just to even get there and go and have a great time and let alone have a chance to make some life-changing money. So congrats to everybody and best of luck this week in some of these big tournaments in that big final down there in the Bahamas.
Boggs, final words?
Just to kind of echo that sentiment, a couple of big-name grinders, some grinders that making the move up in the world. Congrats to all you guys. Beer said it. It's not easy to get to one of those live finals. Bummed I missed out this season, but I'm glad that I didn't lose it on a Drew Brees kneel down. I'll say that. Good luck this weekend, yes. Grinders. And can I say it, Brett?
Sure. I'll let you sign off of here, my friend.
All right. We out ya.
Nice.